I am a pencil drawer. I teach drawing at South County Art Association to adults. I teach other places as well to kids. And the kind of drawing that I teach is realism, because realism to me is the hardest to do. And there's this great quote, something like firm limits and then you play. So where I'm going to really go over how to begin a realistic pencil drawing. My background is I went to art school. I always drew from the time I was a little kid. And I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and I studied fine art, which means I worked on, you know, drawing and painting as my major. And then when I got out of school, I wanted to make money, and I realized, boy, this is going to be hard being a fine artist. So I became an illustrator because I always could draw, and that's needed. So I lived in Manhattan. I lived in New York City for many years, and had a career as an illustrator, like working for all kinds of magazines, newspapers, like New York Times. I worked for, let's see, a lot of kids magazines too. And then I moved to Mystic, Connecticut. And I kind of resumed my fine art career, and I got a gallery. So at this point in my life, I do both. I illustrate for magazines and newspapers, and I also sell my artwork through galleries and other online platforms and that kind of thing. So you have a general idea. So really, I'm a drawer and a painter, but I'm really a drawer, and I love pencil. So I'm going to actually read. It's easier to tell you kind of what this class is about. It's going to improve. It's the basics of realism drawing. So it's going to improve your ability to draw realistically. You're going to learn to have setup skills and how to compose your imagery. Now, a lot of people are very daunted by starting a drawing, and I'm going to teach you that. There really is a way to start a drawing. And I'm going to sharpen your observation skills. You're going to learn to measure. Believe it or not, there's a lot of measuring, and you'll see when we start drawing. And the physics of light, that's light source, and learn to isolate shadows and highlights. And it's basically learning how to see. And before I go on, there's one concept I want to get across to you. It's called the 3-second lookup. And the 3-second lookup is in books. It's in all kinds of instruction books, and it's very well known in the art world. There was even an article about it in the science section in the New York Times. And it basically says this: if you are working on a drawing and you are looking at your drawing more than the reference, it could be a still life that you've set up or a photograph. So basically it goes like this: if you're not looking up every 3 seconds, you're inventing. And it's kind of true. So a lot of times with students, we can't do it on Zoom, but I go around, I go, 3-second lookup, and they immediately get back to looking at their reference. So I'm going to bring that up, and it'll be in a handout. So that's important for you to know. So let's get started about how to go about setting up a drawing. So I'm going to flip the camera, and I would love some input, hoping I get this correct. Oh, what we're going to do quickly, we're going to have supplies. So you all have a pencil and a kneaded eraser. Kneaded erasers are really good erasers because there's no flex, and you also use it in a stamp up motion. And it comes in a square, but you always rip out a little bit. And it's wonderful because you can fashion little tools. You see that? Like to get right down on your artwork. So you need paper, white paper, quality paper. Quality paper means it has something called tooth in it. Tooth is where it's a little bumpy. In other words, it's not like polished, like printing paper. It has to have a little like if you took a microscope and went in on it, it's got like teeth in it. So it has tooth. And also it has to have weight, all right? The other is tracing paper. And that was part of your supplies too. If you don't have tracing paper, just maybe grab some paper, like printing paper, because we're gonna do some preliminary rough sketches after we set up our still life. So you just don't wanna waste your good paper, okay? So starting with that, I am going to show you, we have two objects, and you'll get a handout with this too. Actually, I had a third piece, but I just narrowed it down to two after all. So we're going to draw this shell and a starfish, all right? So I'm going to place it on the tabletop. And this is when I'm gonna switch the camera downward, and then you'll see it, and I'll start showing you how to begin a realistic pencil drawing, okay? All right, excuse me for a minute, let's see here. So I will flip the camera down, and hopefully it's nice and square, meaning it's like right angles. And what I have here is a shell, right? See that shell, seashell, and a starfish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrange it, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a particular setup. And I would like you, when you look at this is the way you're going to be drawing it, okay? Now, there are some issues with which way you see something and the way it shows on the screen, but it doesn't matter. What I want you to see is either way. I don't know if that's the top, bottom for you, but that is basically what we are going to draw, okay? So the first thing that we do when we start our pencil drawing is, as I said, we have, first well, you don't have to concern yourself with that, with setup, because you're working from the actual arrangement that I have. So what you need is a good piece of paper, and you need the tracing paper, okay? So looking at your shell, and the way I've arranged it is there's something called an intersection. Do you see how this starfish is under that? That's important in this particular lesson for you to see that. So I'm assembling the reference, and the first thing I have to determine is a concept called basic unit. So when you look at whatever your reference, whatever you're drawing, be it from a photograph or from a real-time still life, which this is, you have to ask yourself, which is the longest measurement, which is the longest part of any object. So what you are determining is axis, A-X-I-S, you know how the globe is on an axis? So really the shell is the longest point. So this will basically show us that we are going to work in the basic unit of vertical as opposed to horizontal. And in digital terms, that is called portrait landscape. So we're going to work portrait, a vertical. Yes, in fact, no, not yet. We were going to show you a screen share, but it's not quite necessary yet. But so I'm going to, I hope when I move this aside a little bit, you can it's still in the screen. And if there's a way to confirm that from someone. Yep. So, you're okay, thank you. Thanks so much. And I'm even going to push it a tad more. So this is my paper. And the first thing that we are going to do, so everyone should have their their pencil in their hand, is we are going to mark a border, okay? Now watch me do it, and it's no rulers, because there's something about the vitality, the integrity of a hand-drawn border. And there's a reason that I am drawing a border. I have to put my glasses on here. Like I'm just drawing just a little bit in, right? And I'm doing a vertical format, right? So do not worry if it's wonky, because that's kind of cool, okay? So yours will be kind of like that. Like this is where you would do your signature, okay? So here's the upside down issue that we might be running into. So you hand mark a border, and borders act kind of like a cutout, like a mat board used in framing. It helps you crop, because when you're trying to figure out how to put your objects on your paper, you have to really figure out a lot of things. Like sometimes things cast a long shadow. Where am I going to crop the shadow? So this is a great device for keeping everything kind of in proportion and keeping it looking good. And you should always leave a little more inside the border when you're figuring out your image. You should always leave a little more on the bottom, a little more space. Framers always do that when they're matting a picture. Now, because like, here's my signature right there. So I think we have an upside down situation, but for you to see it, it's going to be something like that. So I hope everyone's on board with just marking a border. And we've done this because we figured the axis out, which is kind of a curved and vertical. It's the dominant one. I mean, this has a square axis, but this has a kind of a vertical feel to it. So that means it's the portrait, the vertical. So from now on in, I'm going to tell you, this is a good thing to know, that pencil work, when you're drawing, should be done very lightly. You can always darken lines. Sometimes when people go to a drawing and they go really dark, they actually cut into the paper, and that's a heavy hand. So it's always suggested that when you're drawing to do a light hand. The need for light strokes is very important. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to take our tracing paper. Now what this is really, this is just kind of a practice to get your preliminary shapes down. And preliminary shapes are basically divided up into 3 fundamental shapes, and that is the circle, the square, and the triangle. So this might be a good time for a screen share. There's a piece that it's a piece with the 3 shells, and it shows you fundamental shapes. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to, I have this shell and I have the starfish, right? So I have to figure this out on my paper. So when I say a circle, it's not really an exact circle. It could be kind of an oval. See, this is all preliminary. We're not really doing the real artwork because we have to figure a lot out, right? And I wonder if, I hope you can all see this well, because I can turn to a darker pencil. Then we have to get that little, you know, starfish in there. See how there's a curve? Well, that's pretty close. See, I don't like that because there's no breathing room. So that's why we do it. Sometimes it's called a thumbnail. You know, you just have to, like, that's kind of the way I want it. And I know that's curving. Do you see how a circle can be an oval? Well, if I show you this way, circle, square, triangle, right? A circle can be something like that. A square can be that. A triangle can be that. It's variations on that. So the reason why we're doing this is to block it in, right? So we're just trying different stabs at it to see, to get the right spacing, which really involves getting the right proportion. Proportions are huge. Like if you drew this shell really large, you really wouldn't be able to fit the little starfish in. Like if I went like this for my shell, right, and then went over like this, and you might not have the best of luck getting that starfish in, right? See, with the right proportions. So whoops, see, it's cut off. Now, sometimes, actually, it's more like this. See, that helps you. You can figure things out. Like I went way over. I should have done that. And then this is really important. See the shadow? Shadows are just as important as the object in drawing, in painting, in everything. Light, it's called, right? I mean, think about this. If you were set up a still life and you went into a dark closet and wanted to draw, you wouldn't be able to draw it, would you? Because, right, no light. So when artists talk about light, it really is a huge part of art, is describing light on an object. So that shadow, as I said, is just as important as the object. So you see how I'm just looking every 3 seconds or less, so important, otherwise you're inventing. But this isn't my good drawing, okay? This is just, I'm figuring it all out, okay? Just to get familiar. It's getting familiar with literally what you're drawing. Sometimes when I start a drawing, I'll look at it for 20 minutes and just study it and see, but sometimes, like, look at what I did with, the tail of that. I went like the wrong way. I went way over, you see? So you really have to look at things long and long before you start a serious drawing on it, okay? So our next step is to take our good paper, okay? Because you've already done some preliminary thumbnails, remember? And getting all the shapes. And there will be at this handout that explains fundamental shapes. So you can walk away with that and that'll be helpful. It shows, actually, this is what you'll be seeing, you'll be getting. See the fundamental shapes. Before, I remember I told you I had that other shell, but took it out. So, and there's the axis, it's curved, but it's always about the midline. That's how you find an axis of anything, is the midline, okay? And let's see, right. And light source is another very important part of drawing, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we've removed our tracing paper, and now we're just literally going to repeat what we've done, okay? So in your hand, you should have a pencil and an eraser. This pencil and eraser, this eraser should be used as much as this pencil, because what you're doing is you're trying to figure out, you're measuring, you're just trying to get this as accurate as possible, okay? So lots of erasing and lots of 3-second lookups, and so we will start, and I'll continue with some other little concepts, throwing those in as I start drawing and talk, okay? So I will begin my kind of very light. Remember I told you that? It's always about getting it, because you can go in on it later. to make it dark. So see what I'm doing? I'm just trying to, you know, that gave me trouble, that little tail. So a good thing I did some preliminary artwork. So in another secret is bounce all over your page, because artists have to deal with so many little chores almost, that it's almost important to completely bounce around here. So see how light it is? And I actually hope that you can see it. Let's see, so see how I'm doing that? And that shadow, remember that shadow is important as the object. That's a really good thing to know. Here's another thing. If you started something and it's a really good drawing, that border can be erased. You're the master of the art. Like you can't say, oh no, I drew a border. You know, just erase it. You know, you're the boss, and this is just paper, right? You can do anything. I'm feeling that my length right there is a little long, so I'm going to lower this fundamental shape. Now, what helps me is visualizing, even lightly drawing a midline. And I hope you can see that. So this is going to help me get this shell going here. So there's, see how getting it going. And then I'm going to come to a really, really important concept, and it's called T-sections. T-sections are the biggest secret to accurate drawing. And what goes on is this. If you have an object, and let's say you have a bowl, right? And then behind it is a candlestick. What happens is there's an intersection, like something is sticking up behind the bowl, the candle, right? In this case, we have a shell. So if you can see, like right in here, see how I haven't even finished that yet because I'm bouncing all over my page. Out comes, right there, out comes the little arm of the starfish. Now, this might be another time to have a screen share, because I indicated on one of the handouts a T-section. See, it's in red. So a T-section is wherever something intersects. There's a word called occlusion, which is a more formal word, but it's called a T-section or an intersection. And this, can you see how that would be, how that can make it very accurate, your drawing? And look, that arm of the starfish is giving me a midline. It's a little bendy here. So what you do is, what I do is on sections of my objects, like on this little tail of the shell, I'm figuring about right there is the midline, right? From the bottom to where it ends there. And we might be viewing this a little differently, our perspective. So do it the way that you see it. I'm sure that's occurring. So a little bit to the right of the midline of this tail, out pops the arm. That's going to help me to get it accurate. So now I'm coming up here and I'm seeing, you know, that looks a little big to me. So see how constantly erasing. And I hope I'm not going too fast or too slow. I don't know. We'll keep seeing it. So we're kind of like that. And then I'm actually using my shadow. See, so it comes out like that. Maybe I made it go out a little too much. And remember, drawing lightly is so key. It's so key to, I'm actually thinking that comes out more like that. See, erasing constantly. This is done very lightly. this kind of pencil work. So, and then I notice the shadow, and see my view, that shadow kind of curves. And then interestingly enough, there's that midline I need to this little starfish. This is curving, okay? And I wish I could see all your stuff because I'm so used to going around and like helping people out and saying and pointing things out, or maybe even you correcting me. That happens too. So I'm following that little midline. Midlines are helpful, especially in nature. Nature always provides midlines. Think of just think of different things that have midlines. There's just everything has a midline, even in manufacturing. If you take any kind of object, it was manufactured and they had to make a mold, so they have midlines too. Whoops, so this is interesting. I am finding that that is more like that because there's space between there. So I'm going to erase. So that's really using the concept of negative space. You see, this negative space is really providing, see right in there, it's helping me. It's helping me see what's going on here and to draw it accurately, okay? So, there you go. And still drawing very lightly. Feeling that really curves up right there. And watch what I'm doing. See that midline? That getting a midline is going to help me to the very top of this. See that right there? It might not be up that high, but I'm gonna see. Now I'm seeing kind of a little tabletop here. It's almost like a tabletop and it's going around. And this is called an ellipse. And here's a good little point about ellipses. I'm gonna draw right on this. Ellipses, right, never ever have points. Even if it's the narrowest, it always have to round it. Even if it's as narrow as, let's see, as that, it's always rounded. And a great way to draw an ellipse is do one side on a piece of tracing paper and then, whoops, there's my lead, and get the midline and fold it over, and then you just draw the other. That's a great little tip to know. So we're back to getting our line work down. This is called line work. In art, you're just getting, you're not getting into the details yet. Oh, great. Okay, so I just heard I have 30 minutes, so we're good. We're on. I just wish I could be seeing your stuff. So that's kind of like a, see how that's like a little table, and then it's going down. Like if there was a grid underneath it, that would kind of be the grid, right? I always look at invisible grids when I'm drawing, because you know how they make cartoons like Pixar? What happens is an artist does a drawing and then it is put into a computer that breaks it down. It's called remeshing. And you see the whole mesh, and it works this way and that way. And that is going to help us imagining that grid when we start rendering. And rendering is the word for actual shading realistically, which I think we're going to start very soon on rendering. So let's just wrap. I have no idea where you're at. Maybe you've even finished, but maybe not. And then up pops, look, another little kind of round table, isn't it? And what the view that we are doing, this is, I'm talking about perspective now. This is called a bird's eye view. If I was lying on my stomach and drawing and looking up at a shell, that would be a worm's eye view. And then if I was looking at something straight on, that's called an elevation. And then everything in between that is doesn't have a name, but you certainly should know bird's eye, worm's eye, and straight on, which is elevation. And the way to tell, figure out what perspective you're working from is find a surface. Like I'll just draw something really quickly to show you. If I am looking at a shelf, right? This is a shelf and it has a sugar bowl on it. Okay, I mean, that's so crazy. I just made that up, right? There's the top of the sugar bowl, and there, I know that I am a worm's eye view because I'm seeing underneath, right? I'm seeing underneath that shelf. So that helps you with perspective. If I was like this, look, if I was like that, that would be that perspective is a bird's eye view because I'm looking down on it, okay? And so I would see the top of the sugar bowl, right? Something like that. I really work on it more, but something to that effect, okay? So back to our shell. Good to learn about perspective when you're drawing. So, wow, I'm seeing that I did this super large, but I'm just going to get it in so we can start rendering it. Now remember I said rendering is it's basically called hatching. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked with a traditional pen, but that is a hatch mark. And then you've heard of cross hatching. So in realism, there is a hatch called the smooth hatch, and that's in your handout. So you'll have all that information. So the smooth hatch is like that. So I teach students this. It's almost like a check mark, only don't do the little upper part. And the reason why this is used in realism, see, you do very light, you keep going over it. See that feathered area? So then you work really lightly, because if you, let's say we're rendering a ball with a light source, right? That is like this. You have to start dark here and then it fades out to the feathering. So that is when we start our smooth hatch rendering. But before we do that, we have to determine light source. So looking at, oh, lower, wonderful. I bet you're all happy. Thank you, that helps. Oh dear, my hair, yeah. Okay, so I know that the light source is coming from this side. And the reason why I know it, there's a cast shadow, right? Right, and see that little area there? Again, ours might be slightly different. So no filling in, the shadows are always done last. Never start rendering a shadow till the piece is finished, and I'll tell you why when we start getting there. So you see how that shadow, is it not as important as the object? It really informs a lot of the beauty of this drawing. So I am finding right there, there's a T section, that little shadow, see, comes out there and then extends there. And look, there's another shadow, a drop shadow that's going to fade right into, see, if I was using my kneaded eraser, look, you can fashion little tools. So look over here, oh, that's erased because it was too long. So see that? That is a shadow. This is so important, shadows, beauty. I'm not doing this as accurately, but we want to get the time. So there's a drop shadow. There's a drop shadow. Shadows are the secret. Then what we're going to concern ourselves now are isolated shapes. Now, this might be a good time for a screen share. I have a sample, not of a shell, but of the way I start working on a drawing. I'm not sure if there is a screen share, but I'm showing you this. Do you see where, okay, actually, if there is a screen share, we can stop the screen share because I want to point some things out on the sample I have here. Do you see what I do before I start doing my realistic drawing? I see right there, that's dark, right? So what you are looking for are shadows and highlights, and then all the values in between. So right there, it's almost as though you just like look for the darks, look for the lights, and you say, oh, wow, that looks like Vermont, you know, upside down, or, you know, it's a good little way to see things. And this is such a huge, huge secret. It's an aid for you to be able to draw more accurately, to first put in these little dashed lines of where you are going to put your shadows on the object. So I'm seeing right now, and I'm just doing it very lightly because you don't want these in size. You don't want these dark. I'm seeing, see that right there? That is going to all be dark there. I see a dark area like right up here, you know, along the side, which makes sense, right? Because the light source is all coming from there. Oh, I'm seeing something there. That's like a cracked opening. And then I'm starting also, well, one thing I didn't mention is once you get, you know, when you're working on your fundamental shapes, then you have to start erasing and you have to commit to the proper lines. This is for realism only. See how there's like a little drop shadow all along here. I wonder if I can even get closer in there. See, on that shell, I'm seeing, I'll go higher, I'm seeing dark and light, right? So this dark is kind of coming down, getting back to that invisible grid, right? And let's see, there's darkness there. And see how there's a light area right in there? See, pull in and then back out. And I really am seeing like a darkness right there. And that's obviously because this is concave, and concave things are darker, right? And I'm actually seeing, there's this darkness there, but then it kind of goes up into a peak there, right? And even though the light source is coming from here, I'm still seeing like a darkness here. And that's only because it's like a ball. It's like a circle, you know, the bottom of a circle is always going to be a bit darker. So there's that, that's the dark. Sometimes I even put X's, really, like when I give little remembering clues when I go back. And then again, you see a little more, that's going to be light. So I'm gonna work out from there. And see that, this is where I talk about you have to commit to a line. Once you get the right ellipse and all that, see how you clean it up? Then, so that is the wall of that. So then you see kind of that light area there, and you know this is going to be darker. Okay, so keep spiraling up. That I have to, is not completely right. I don't like that. Let's see. So There's our little curve for the ellipse, remember? And look what's going on here, an intersection. That's helping me. See, right there, another T-section, right there. Invaluable information to know about T-sections. It's measuring. Drawing is a lot of measuring at first. So see how we're getting that, and then now my ellipses are a little off, but I'm doing this fast, and there, so we're getting there. Now, shadows. When I start a shadow, wherever there is contact with the surface, like this shell is really touching the tabletop right here, so it's going to be very dark there. Now, I have a feeling, yeah, I'm right. This is kind of up in the air. It's not really touching. So the shadow is going to be lighter. So whenever you start drawing shadows, but we'll get into that. That's the last thing we do, shadows. And I really know that this little starfish is way too chubby. So I'm going to just go with it, and just so you can see stuff. So now we're going to, remember I talked about the smooth hatch? That is the stroke for realism. So you should always launch your smooth hatch from an edge, from a border. So see how I'm going? Remember that hatch mark? Let's see, did I draw it? There it is. See, it's like this. I'm going to show you up close. That's the smooth hatch, and that will be in your handout, as I said. So back to it. And the reason why, remember I told you, is that sometimes shadows are not abrupt. They just kind of lighten out. Oh, here's another trick. After I do a drawing, I stamp up my pencil work so only I can see it. Oh boy, knock that. Okay, so I stamp it up, but I still can see my little isolated shape, see? So, and then, remember we talked about the invisible grid? It also goes this way. So that's the way I'm getting my darkness, is going almost like cross-hatching, right? So it's getting very light there. And now is the time to, like, you know, darken things, and especially where there's an intersection. Like this little arm of the starfish it is darker than the shell, but it also has a shadow over, but the shell, although lighter, is in front of it. So I like to prove something's in front of it. So sometimes I'll just kind of, when I draw by it, I just kind of, you know, darken it a little bit. And starting with the shadows, right? Now, when you get really skillful with your pencil strokes, you can do curlicues, you can do zigzags. You just have to control the pressure of your pencil lead. So if you feel confident with your drawing, like I said, curlicues, everything, it's lightness. But the standard way to start is the smooth hatch is to launch from a border if possible. Now, I'm interrupting myself, but remember that little isolated shape I did? And then it kind of gets super dark right there. I'm going to start kind of doing that because I don't want to forget it, because I have stamped it up. See? So. And I also attached some samples with all this, that you can see how the smooth hatch does work in realism. Now, in pencil drawing, it is much like watercolor. And I'll tell you why. In watercolor, the artist leaves the white of the paper for the highlight, right? Do you follow that? So I have a drawing here I'm going to show you. This is a drawing that I did for the New York Times, okay? Now, if you can see this, see her shoulder, whoops, I just drew on it, that white part is the paper. So you're basically going from very dark near her shoulder, and you're coming in and see that I probably, with my little dashed lines, made that shape. So that's an application of the concept right there, the white of the paper showing, okay? So that is going to remind you to do it as well. Now, okay, so now to prove that that is very light, and I'm talking about this right here, that's light, I'm going to start working my strokes in. And another important point is when you're applying pencil strokes to your realistic drawing that you're working on, try to do your pencil marks directionally. Like this shell provides amazing directions. It's almost like you have a little tool in your hand, and you're stroking the lead, the graphite, in the way that it's growing. Do you follow that? So see how I'm coming in all around, like that area right there, not very resolved at all, and then, whoops, there's that curve to the ellipse. You'll never forget that lesson. So then I also have, a lot of times I have to rotate my paper, whoops, when I draw, because your wrist, the mobility of your wrist is limited. So I always encourage students to move their paper around. Again, just like the way you're allowed to erase a border, there's no reason why your paper has to be square in front of you. You're the boss of your drawing. Okay, what's that? That is another intersection, isn't it? So let's see if I have that accurate with my little tabletop there. Sometimes it helps to get back to. So that's coming around, yeah. And at that point in this kind of the side of the tabletop, I'm calling it that. Of course, it's the side of the shell. Again, I'm going directionally. See how I'm doing light ones, and it's going up. There's that smooth hatch right there. And then I have the dark right there. And then I want to, there's the smooth hatch. See, it's going both ways, this grid. Now, you would continue on that. And because I'm not quite sure how much time we have, but I really want to assist you with the shadow. Okay, see those little dotted lines? I'm gonna go back over those, but shadows emanate from the object, okay? And so I literally, once I've blocked out very lightly, oh, we have 5 more minutes. So I'm so glad I switched to shadows. See how my pencil launches from the actual object. And oh, talk about stamping up, hugely stamp up shadows, because very rarely do shadows have an edge to it. Sometimes with fluorescent lights, it creates crazy things and there are edges, but generally, see my kneaded eraser, I'm super stamping up. So I want to make it easier for me. So again, I rotate my paper and I'm emanating out from the border of the shell, right? And you know, I could go forever, so I'm gonna do curly cues and that, because I've been doing this for a long time, drawing. And there's a really fun little thing that happens with the shadow. Remember, it crosses over the, I want you to see this closely. It crosses over the arm of the starfish, and actually do talk about directional, like really do it like it's going over, you know, it, and it's got volume to it. And then there's a T section, right? Okay, so continuing. And what you want to do is fade this out, and I'll just do one section of it because we're going to have to end, and it's something like that. Sometimes you can use your finger. I use my finger a lot. It has moisture. Like I just see I went a little too hard on something. See how that shadow fast? And so basically I have all these isolated dashed lines, and that's in your handout. So you'll have that kind of information. There's a directional stroke. See, it's like a circle, and it's also coming up, right? So if I kept going and going with this, with this smooth hatch that we're doing, this realism hatch, it would be completely real looking, because there's a lot of fun things up here, especially there's that shadow. Sometimes there's double shadows. There, see? And then that's fun too. That runs into that. There's that drop shadow. And then there. And I wish I had more time, because, and I wish I could see yours. Maybe that we can make that possible, to see how all of you did. Well, I think you have the general idea. We covered a lot of things. We covered assembling reference. We covered access. We covered borders, using tracing paper for the fundamentals, removing it, and then repeating it on the good paper. We started midlines to find T sections, very helpful. Of course, light source, and then we went into the rendering, and the realism pencil stroke was just called the smooth hatch. So I think you got a good little education on a realistic drawing. Now, that doesn't mean realism is the best, but that whole thing I said about firm limits, and then you play, first learn to do the fundamental hard stuff. And if you don't want to stick with it, go on to abstract, anything. But it's good to always fall back on accurate drawing. So I'm going to end this, and thank you so much. I love working with the Kingstown Public Library, and hope we can do it again. And again, I would really love to see your artwork. Okay, so I'm going to bring my, hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Is that the
Thank
conclusion?
you so much.
Thank you. I'd love to see the pieces that came out of this. So hopefully that could happen.
Yes, as I say,
Okay.
if anybody has actually art from this session or any of the other ones that you want to share, feel free to take pictures of it and email it to me. We'll share it on our library Facebook group.
Oh,
you
wonderful.
credit your name if you don't want to.
No,
and it's okay if it's even just works in progress to show what you've learned.
yes, works in progress. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Hope it worked out well on your end.
All right, and I'm just gonna
take
the winner from our raffle.
Okay, take care.
Our winner today is Josie. You can see that way up there. I will send you an email on how to pick up your prize. And if you guys, like I said, I know that there was a survey attached to some of the stuff I sent you. Please fill that out. I can't stress that enough. And thank you guys all for joining us today. And I will email you all the things from this class and this survey, and I'll email you, Josie, on picking up your prize. So thank you guys so much for joining us for all of these sessions, and keep an eye out for future art programs and other programs we have here at the library. So have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
So were you able to insert the, I said a couple of times.